Greetings, explorers of the shadows and seekers of hidden truth. You have entered the portal of the unknown, where ancient secrets challenge the present and prophecies echo through the cycles of time. Today, we delve into the story of Ruth, a woman whose journey of faith and redemption intertwines with the messianic lineage. In a time of chaos and despair, Ruth emerges as a symbol of loyalty and humility, whose presence shapes the future of Israel. Ruth, a Moabite foreigner, chose to leave her homeland and gods to follow Naomi, her mother-in-law, and embrace the God of Israel. Her decision was not merely an act of family compassion, but a bold step toward true faith. By saying, "Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God," Ruth broke with her past and aligned herself with divine destiny. Ruth's journey led her to the fields of Boaz, a man of integrity and a kinsman redeemer who recognized her virtue and offered her protection. Through acts of humility and hard work, Ruth earned the respect of the community and eventually won Boaz's heart. Their marriage not only redeemed her socially, but also placed her in the lineage that would lead to King David and, ultimately, the promised Messiah. Ruth's story transcends time, revealing that true redemption knows no boundaries of blood or nation, but manifests in those who seek truth with humility and faithfulness. Just as Ruth found grace in the fields of Bethlehem, we too are called to seek light amid the shadows, trusting that divine purpose is fulfilled through our sincere surrender and willingness to follow the path of eternal truth. In the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16, she declares, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." These words echo through the centuries, revealing a soul willing to abandon everything for a new covenant with the God of Israel. By uttering these words, Ruth not only expresses loyalty to Naomi, but also demonstrates a profound spiritual commitment to the God of Israel. She renounces her Moabite identity, the pagan gods, and the traditions of her homeland to submit to the divine will. This act of faith was not driven by obligation or convenience, but by a genuine conviction that truth and redemption are found in the God of Israel. Ruth becomes a symbol of conversion and faithfulness, showing that the divine calling transcends bloodlines and cultural barriers. Her decision to stay with Naomi and seek refuge under the wings of the Almighty reflects the spiritual journey of all those who abandon the old ways to follow the light of eternal truth. The impact of this declaration extends beyond Ruth's personal life. By marrying Boaz, she becomes part of the Davidic lineage, which ultimately leads to the birth of the Messiah. Thus, her choice shapes not only the destiny of one family, but of all humanity, pointing to the final redemption that would come through Jesus Christ. Therefore, Ruth's words are not just a testimony of family loyalty, but an eternal invitation for all of us, regardless of our origins, to embrace the covenant with the true God and become part of His story of redemption and unconditional love. Ruth's decision to follow Naomi and embrace the Israelite faith places her on the path of divine providence. Driven by unwavering love and loyalty that transcends cultural boundaries, Ruth leaves her homeland of Moab to accompany Naomi back to Bethlehem. Her commitment is not only to her mother-in-law, but also to the God of Israel, as she declares, "Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth 1:16. This declaration marks a turning point in her life, an act of surrender that aligns her with God's eternal purposes. Upon arriving in Bethlehem, Ruth demonstrates humility and dedication as she seeks sustenance in the fields of Boaz, a close relative of Naomi. Her servant-like attitude and strong work ethic impress Boaz, who, touched by her loyalty and courage, welcomes and protects her. Divine providence unfolds as Boaz, acting as the kinsman redeemer, marries Ruth, restoring the lineage of Elimelech, Naomi's late husband. From this union, Obed is born, who would become the grandfather of King David. Thus, Ruth, a foreign Moabite, is integrated into the messianic lineage, becoming a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ, as recorded in Matthew 1:5. Ruth's story reveals God's sovereignty in working through human choices and adverse circumstances. Even amid pain and loss, Ruth's faithfulness and Boaz's kindness reflect God's redemptive nature, transforming tragedy into hope. Ruth's inclusion in the genealogy of Jesus not only demonstrates the openness of God's salvation plan to all nations, but also highlights the significance of faith and obedience in fulfilling divine purposes. Moreover, Ruth's journey serves as a powerful testimony to the value of perseverance and trust in God. Her story inspires those facing difficult times to remain faithful, trusting that God, in His infinite wisdom, is orchestrating all things for the good of those who love Him. Through Ruth, we see how divine grace can redeem the past and secure a future of hope and restoration. Ruth's journey teaches us about the power of faithfulness and unconditional love, revealing the profound impact that unwavering trust in God can have on our lives. Her willingness to leave her homeland and her people for a faith she was still discovering not only demonstrates remarkable courage, but also a solid trust in divine mercy. By making this choice, Ruth shows a total surrender to the Lord, with an open heart ready to be led by Him, even though she didn't fully understand the plan God had for her. This act of faith is a clear example of how faithfulness can transform lives, not just the ones who practice it, but also those around them. Leaving behind her family, culture, and everything familiar was not an easy decision for Ruth. She had witnessed the loss of her husband and saw her mother-in-law, Naomi, in deep sorrow, with no one left to sustain them. But even in the face of adversity, Ruth chooses to stay with Naomi and journey to a foreign land, not knowing what to expect. Her heart was filled with love and loyalty, not only to Naomi, but also to God. Ruth's faithfulness to her mother-in-law and her decision to convert to the Israelite faith show that often faithfulness requires bold steps of trust and surrender, leading us to places and situations that may seem uncertain and challenging at first. As Ruth's journey unfolds, we can see how divine mercy intertwines with her choices. Her faithfulness does not go unnoticed, and God begins to open doors of blessing in her life in unexpected ways. When she arrives in Bethlehem, the Lord guides her to the fields of Boaz, where her life begins to change dramatically. Ruth's encounter with Boaz, a just and generous man, is a clear reflection of God's goodness in responding to those who seek Him with a sincere heart. Boaz becomes the instrument of divine providence, demonstrating how faithful God is to those who walk His path, even when the steps seem unsure. The unconditional love that Ruth shows to Naomi and her trust in God, even when she doesn't know what the future holds, also echoes in our own daily challenges. Often we are called to take steps of faith in uncertain situations, not knowing what lies ahead. Ruth's story reminds us that even in adversity, God is with us, working silently to bring about the fulfillment of His plans in our lives. Ruth's faithfulness was not in vain. She was blessed beyond measure and became a foundational part of the salvation story, with her lineage culminating in the birth of King David and later Jesus Christ. This teaches us that our faithfulness, no matter how small, can have an eternal impact, transforming not just our own story, but also the future of the generations to come. The harvest in Boaz's fields, described in Ruth chapter 2, symbolizes not only material provision, but also the grace that God pours out on those who seek refuge under His wings. In Ruth 2 verse 12, Boaz, blessing Ruth, declares, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." This verse encapsulates a powerful message, revealing God's generosity and Ruth's trust in His providence. The harvest, a moment of physical and spiritual abundance, is a reflection of God's care and protection over those who humbly and faithfully seek Him. Ruth, a foreign Moabite woman, had chosen to follow Naomi and take refuge under the wings of the God of Israel. Her decision to leave her homeland and family, driven by a newfound faith, placed her under God's protection. By entering Boaz's fields, she is not just seeking grain for food, but symbolically seeking shelter and security in the shadow of the Almighty. Boaz's field becomes not just a place of provision, but also a space for spiritual reconciliation, where God's mercy is tangibly expressed through Boaz's kindness. The phrase, "under whose wings you have come to take refuge," is a profound metaphor that speaks to God's protection and care for His people. In the scriptures, God's wings are often used to symbolize His loving protection and the shelter He offers those who trust in Him. For example, in Psalm 91:4, it says, "He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge." Thus, Thus, Ruth's act of seeking shelter in Boaz's fields is an illustration of how God is faithful to provide refuge and safety for those who surrender to his will. In the context of Ruth's story, the harvest is not just a moment of gathering grain, but a symbol of God's generosity and the reward for her faithfulness. Boaz, being a man of character and faith, acts as an instrument of divine grace, ensuring that Ruth and Naomi are not only provided for materially, but also blessed on a deeper level. Boaz's decision to protect Ruth and make sure she has abundance in the fields reflects God's generosity, who not only sustains physically, but also rewards us spiritually for our faith and devotion. Thus, the abundance of the harvest is a reflection of God's blessing, which is poured out on those who seek refuge in him and obey his commands. Ruth's story teaches us that when we surrender ourselves to God and trust in his providence, we are not merely seeking something material, but we are participating in a spiritual journey that brings abundance of grace, blessings, and protection. Even in times of scarcity or uncertainty, as Ruth faced when she arrived in Bethlehem, we can trust that God will provide for those who take refuge under his wings, just as he did for her. And this provision extends not only to what is tangible, but to a reward that transcends human understanding, being an expression of divine faithfulness and love. The marriage to Boaz seals Ruth's redemption, showing that God honors those who follow him with sincerity and a heart willing to obey his will. Ruth's decision to remain with Naomi and devote herself to the faith of Israel despite being a Moabite foreigner is abundantly and transformatively rewarded. The marriage to Boaz is not merely a solution to Ruth and Naomi's material needs, but a divine act of restoration and redemption. By marrying Boaz, Ruth is integrated into the lineage of Israel, and her story of faithfulness and love becomes a key piece in the fulfillment of God's eternal plans. This marriage, which may seem simple in the eyes of man, is, in fact, a turning point in the story of salvation, revealing God's sovereignty and his ability to use even those who at first glance appear distant from his purposes. Ruth's relationship with Boaz goes beyond simply fulfilling a legal duty, like redeeming Elimelech's lineage. This marriage symbolizes God's great redemption, which not only restored Ruth and Naomi's lives, but also paved the way for something even greater. The child born of this union, Obed, will be the grandfather of King David, and from David's line will come the messianic lineage culminating in Jesus Christ. Ruth's story intertwines with the redemption narrative of all humanity, as through her, God teaches us that his plans are not confined to a specific people, but involve all of creation. Ruth, a Moabite woman, becomes one of the key figures in the story that would lead to the birth of the Savior, showing that God uses even foreigners and outcasts to fulfill his eternal salvation plans. This inclusion of Ruth in the messianic lineage is a testament to God's immeasurable and inclusive love, showing that he shows no partiality. Ruth's story teaches us that, regardless of our background, God can call and use us to fulfill his purposes. By following Naomi and submitting to God's guidance, Ruth becomes one of the great women of the Bible, and her story is an example of what happens when someone fully surrenders to God's plans. God honors those who seek him with all their heart, and in Ruth's case, he honors her not only with a new beginning and a new family, but also with a pivotal role in the genealogical line that would lead to the birth of Jesus Christ. The union of Ruth and Boaz is also a symbolic representation of the relationship between Christ and his church. Just as Boaz redeemed Ruth and brought her into the family of Israel, Christ redeems those who follow him and integrates them into his divine family. Therefore, Ruth's redemption points to the great redemption offered by Christ, showing that through his grace, even the farthest and most excluded can be received and restored. The redemption of Ruth then not only seals her personal redemption, but also marks the beginning of a lineage that, through Jesus, would bring redemption to all of humanity. This teaches us that just as God used a Moabite woman to fulfill he can also use our lives, no matter how improbable they may seem, to accomplish his eternal purposes. Ruth's story reminds us that redemption is an act of grace, and God is faithful to honor those who follow him with a sincere heart. The story of Ruth is a powerful reminder that true Faith transcends origins and boundaries, revealing that God's plan of redemption is not limited to a specific people but extends to all who choose to trust in Him. Ruth, a Moabite, a foreigner, decides to follow Naomi and adopt the Israelite faith, leaving behind her homeland and culture to submit to God's providence. This decision shows that true faith is not confined by circumstances or lineage, but is a personal choice to surrender to God's sovereign plans. Her story teaches us that genuine faith can overcome any barrier, whether geographic, cultural, or social, and that when we surrender ourselves to God with sincerity, He leads us beyond what we can imagine, fulfilling His eternal purposes in our lives. Additionally, Ruth's journey invites us to trust in divine providence, even in times of uncertainty and pain. When Ruth and Naomi face the loss of their husbands and find themselves in a foreign land with no resources, Ruth's faith becomes a key to their restoration. Instead of despairing or giving up, Ruth chooses to trust that God has a plan, even when everything seems lost. Her decision to follow Naomi and seek refuge under God's wings is an example of how trust in divine providence can lead us to an unexpected and blessed future. Ruth's story not only teaches us the importance of faith in difficult times, but also reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God's grace and faithfulness are more powerful than any circumstance. Reflecting on Ruth's life, we realize that God, in His infinite wisdom, uses even the most difficult and unexpected situations to fulfill His perfect plans. Ruth unknowingly became a key figure in the lineage that would lead to the birth of Jesus Christ, and her story teaches us that regardless of our origin or the adversities we face, God can use us in surprising ways to accomplish His will. Ruth's faith and willingness to follow divine guidance, even without fully understanding the future, serve as a model for all of us, reminding us that true faith is one that fully trusts in God, even when the path is unclear. If you want to uncover more about the hidden connections between biblical characters and God's plan of redemption, subscribe to the Portal of the Unknown. The secrets of the past await those who have the courage to seek them. On our channel, we explore the deeper layers of Scripture and reveal the mysteries woven into the story of salvation. Join us and discover how the faith of figures like Ruth and other biblical characters connects to God's grand plan for humanity. Each revelation brings a new understanding of divine purpose and the surprising ways He fulfills His plans.